It was Christmas morning when my parents told me to pack my things and get out of the house I'd paid for. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air and carols drifted from the kitchen, warm and bright, but my father's voice cut through it like ice. "Emily, it's time you moved out. We've decided it's best." I thought I'd misheard him. The living room glowed with twinkling lights, the tree heavy with ornaments from my childhood, and for a moment I honestly believed this was some kind of cruel holiday joke. But my mother didn't laugh. She crossed her arms, her tone clipped and cold. "We've been patient long enough. You've been living here rent-free for too long. You're 33, Emily. It's time you grew up and stopped relying on us. Rent-free." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it, but my throat was too tight. The mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, all of it had my name on it. I'd bought this house with my savings. I was the one who'd made it possible for them to live here at all. Yet there they were telling me to leave as if I were some burden they'd been forced to carry. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, the lights from the tree flickering over the reflection of my face in the window. I could see snow beginning to fall outside, soft, quiet, indifferent to the wreckage happening inside. My father's voice broke the silence again. "We think it'll be good for everyone," he said. "The tension in this house isn't healthy. You need to find your own place." "My own place," I whispered. "This is my place." Mom rolled her eyes. "You always make everything about you. We're trying to have a nice Christmas, and here you go again with your attitude." My attitude, I turned toward her, my voice shaking. "You're throwing me out on Christmas Day, and I'm the one ruining it." Dad sighed heavily as if I were an unruly child. "We'll give you until tonight to pack your things. Your brother's coming over later, and we don't want a scene." "Of course. Ryan, the golden son, the one who could do no wrong. I should have known he was behind this somehow." I walked past them to my room, numb, the world outside still calm and bright. The smell of the pine tree mixed with something sour in my stomach. In my doorway, I looked back one last time. My parents were already turning back to their breakfast, whispering to each other, pretending this was just another day. But it wasn't. It was the day they erased me from their lives. I threw clothes into my suitcase without thinking, jeans, sweaters, the coat I'd bought last winter when Dad said he couldn't afford to get one for himself. I tucked my laptop into its case, my phone charger, a photo album I'd kept since college. My hands were shaking, but my mind was strangely clear. If they wanted me gone, they'd get their wish. When I carried my suitcase down the stairs, Mom barely looked up. "Please don't make a scene, Emily. We don't need the neighbors hearing you cry again." I almost dropped the bag right there. "The neighbors," I said quietly. "You care about the neighbors now. Do they know your daughter bought this house so you wouldn't lose your apartment?" Dad's face tightened. "Watch your tone." My tone. I laughed softly, bitterly. "You're kicking me out of my own home, Dad. What tone do you expect?" Mom pressed her lips together. "You've always been dramatic. You act like we owe you everything just because you helped us out a little. We're tired of walking on eggshells around you." "A little," I said. "I paid for this house in full. I paid for your car insurance, the internet, the electricity, everything you use. You haven't paid a single bill in 3 years." "That's enough," Dad snapped. "You're not welcome here anymore. Go." And just like that, I was out on the porch, my suitcase beside me, the cold air biting through my coat. The snow had picked up flakes, catching in my hair, as I stood there staring at the wreath on the door, the one I'd made for them last Christmas when I still believed love could fix things. I got into my car and sat there for a long moment, watching the windows of my house glow warm and golden, listening to the faint sound of laughter. My mother's silhouette passed by the living room window, then my father's, both moving around the Christmas tree like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed a text from Ryan. "Heard you're finally leaving. Don't make this harder for them. They've done enough for you. Enough." That word burned through me. I could feel the anger rising slow and clean like fire finding oxygen. I started the car, but I didn't drive away. I sat there in the falling snow, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. If they thought I was helpless, they were wrong. I'd spent years keeping everything in my name, because deep down I'd known something like this would happen. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and began scrolling through the list of payments: electricity, water, internet, the joint insurance policy, Dad's car loan, the credit card they'd maxed out in my name. One by one, I hit cancel. Electricity gone, internet gone, insurance gone. The auto-pays that had kept their lives comfortable for years vanished in a few taps. The irony wasn't lost on me. On Christmas morning, they'd thrown me out claiming I was a burden. By Christmas night, they'd find out just how much they depended on me. I sat back and let out a shaky breath. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't guilt or exhaustion. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close. It was power. Still, as I drove away, a small part of me ached for what I'd lost. This was supposed to be our home. I'd imagined family dinners, laughter, maybe even reconciliation. Instead, all I got was silence and snow. But sometimes silence is the cleanest kind of revenge. I parked near the lake a few miles away, watching the icy water ripple under the pale winter Sunday. My phone vibrated with notifications, none from my parents. Not yet, but I knew they'd come. When the bills stopped, when the lights went out, when their phones lost service, and the car insurance got canceled, then they'd remember whose name was on every account. And soon they'd find out whose name was on the deed, too. The next morning, I woke up in my car, parked by the frozen lake. The windows were fogged, the air inside heavy and stale, and my breath came out in clouds. The silence after a storm is strange. It hums with the echo of everything you didn't say. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ripples beneath the thin layer of ice, wondering how everything had turned into this. They said I was living off them. But the truth was, without me, they wouldn't have had a roof over their heads. 5 years earlier, I'd been 28, working endless hours at a small accounting firm in Chicago. I was the first to arrive, last to leave running numbers for clients who barely remembered my name. I didn't take vacations. My lunches were leftovers eaten over spreadsheets, and I walked home most nights to save on gas. Every dollar I made went into a savings account I called Someday. Someday I'd have my own place. Someday I'd stop renting cramped apartments that smelled like someone else's cooking. Someday I'd feel safe. When I finally found the little 3-bedroom house on Willow Creek Drive, I cried in the empty living room after signing the papers. The walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, and sunlight poured through the window like a promise. I ran my hand along the smooth kitchen counter and whispered to myself, "You did this, Em. You built this." That house was more than property, it was proof. Proof that hard work could mean something. Proof that I could survive on my own. A year later, my parents called. My father had been laid off from the auto plant. After 30 years, my mother's health was declining and medical bills were stacking up. "Just for a few months," Dad said over the phone. "Until we get back on our feet." Of course I said yes. What kind of daughter would I be if I didn't? I moved my desk out of the master bedroom so they could have it turned my office into a guest room for them. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family. That's what good daughters do. At first it felt almost nice. We had dinners together again, watched movies, laughed like we used to. Mom would bake pies. Dad would fix the leaky faucet. It almost felt like I had my family back. But slowly things began to change. Mom stopped offering to pay for groceries. Dad started leaving the lights on in every room. Then they stopped paying for anything at all. When I gently brought it up one night, Mom brushed me off with a wave of her hand. "Don't be silly, honey. We'll settle up when things calm down." But things never calmed down. Months turned into a year, then 2. One morning I walked out to get the mail and noticed something missing the little metal nameplate on the mailbox that read E. Carter. In its place, a shiny new one gleamed the Thompsons. When I asked about it, Dad smiled like it was nothing. Oh, I thought it'd look better, family name and all. I wanted to say, "This is my home, not ours," but the words stuck in my throat. Every time I tried to remind them that the house was legally mine, guilt rushed in before the truth could escape. Then came the money. It started small. "Emily, can I borrow your card for gas or honey? I'll pay you back after the doctor's visit." But the repayments never came. Before long, I was covering the water, electricity, and their car insurance. Then Dad asked me to add him to my credit card just in case. I didn't realize just in case meant maxing it out on tools and dinners. One night I sat at my desk scrolling through my online statements. The numbers didn't lie. I was spending over $2,000 a month just to keep this family afloat, half my paycheck gone, vanishing into their debts and excuses. When I confronted them, Mom sighed dramatically. "You'll understand when you have kids someday," she said, not looking up from her tablet. "I'm not your child support," I said quietly. Dad's voice boomed across the room. "Watch your tone. You'd be nothing without us. We gave you everything." I bit my tongue, staring at the floor. In that moment, I realized something. Some debts can never be repaid, not because they're too large, but because they were never owed in the first place. And then Ryan showed up. He arrived on a Wednesday afternoon with a grin, 2 duffel bags, and a story about taking a break from work. He hadn't worked in nearly a year. Within days, he'd claimed my old office as his room, borrowed my car, and complained that the Wi-Fi was slow. Mom fussed over him like he was 12 again. "He's had a hard time, Em. Don't make him feel bad." Dad clapped him on the back at dinner. Good to have a man around the house again. The words stung. I'd been the one holding this family together, paying every bill, but somehow I was invisible. The golden sun had returned, and suddenly, I was the villain. Ryan started dropping hints that maybe the house should belong to the family. He said things like, "You don't even need all this space, Em. You could get a condo downtown, something cute." Mom nodded along. "You're always working, sweetie. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere closer to the city." It felt coordinated, rehearsed. Every word meant to nudge me out of the picture. That night I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. I could hear their laughter downstairs faint through the vents. I felt trapped inside my own walls, like a guest in a place I'd built from scratch. I started keeping track of everything: bills, receipts, bank transfers, every cent I spent on them. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was self-preservation. One evening, while sorting paperwork for taxes, I noticed that all my property documents were still stored under my name: mortgage, taxes, title, everything. I remembered how the banker had told me, "Keep your digital files updated, Miss Carter, just in case you ever need proof of ownership." I didn't know why, but I felt a chill when I heard that in my head. Just in case. So I printed everything, neatly labeled the folders, and locked them in a small metal file cabinet in the closet. It was almost a reflex, like buckling a seatbelt before a crash you haven't seen coming. Weeks later, I caught Ryan snooping near my desk. When I asked what he was doing, he laughed it off. "Relax, Em. I was just looking for the Wi-Fi password." But his eyes lingered on the drawer where I kept my papers. Something in me shifted, then a quiet realization that I wasn't paranoid. I was being prepared. As I looked around that house, the home that was supposed to be mine, I felt the weight of every choice I'd made for the sake of love, family, and duty. Each one had chipped away a little piece of me until there was nothing left to give. I stood in the doorway that night, watching my parents and brother laughing around the dinner table, wine glasses, clinking plates piled high. They looked happy, content, like everything in their world was exactly as it should be. And I understood something very clearly. It wasn't that I didn't belong there anymore. It was that I'd never truly been allowed to belong. I turned off the lights in my room, locked the file cabinet, and whispered to myself, "You might need this someday." I didn't know it then, but that small act, those papers, those backups, would become the lifeline that changed everything. Because what they didn't know was that the house they'd turned into their kingdom was still mine down to the last brick. And one day they were going to learn that lesson the hard way. A few weeks before Christmas, the house started to feel different. The air was heavier, somehow the warmth gone from the walls I'd painted myself. Dad was taking more phone calls in the garage, his voice low and tense. Mom hovered around him like a nervous shadow, whispering questions I couldn't quite hear. Ryan had started disappearing for hours at a time, coming home with the kind of grin men wear when they're hiding something. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. After years of gaslighting, you start to doubt your own instincts. But then one night I heard Dad's voice through the half-open door to the kitchen. "Don't worry," he said. "Once the refinance clears, we'll finally be free." Refinance. The word sliced through the quiet like a blade. My heart thudded in my chest. Free from what? From me. The next morning I brushed it off, forcing myself to smile as I poured coffee. But the feeling wouldn't leave. Something was wrong. A few days later, I got a call from my bank while I was at work. "Miss Carter," the woman said in that polite but cautious tone banks use when they're about to ruin your day. "We've noticed unusual activity on your joint account." What I frowned. "Your joint credit account with Mr. Robert Thompson. Several cash advances and purchases over the past 2 months." It took me a second to process it. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I don't have a joint account with my father." But there wasn't a mistake. There was a balance $12,000 already overdue. I left work early, my stomach in knots, the snow on the windshield blurring into streaks of white as I drove home. When I walked into the living room, Dad was sitting on the couch, watching football, a beer in his hand, like nothing in the world was wrong. "Dad," I said, holding up my phone. "Did you open a credit account using my name?" He barely looked up. "It's a family card. Don't make a big deal. Don't make a big deal." My voice trembled. "You used my social security number without telling me." Mom appeared in the doorway, drying her hands with a towel. "He meant to tell you, sweetheart. The car needed repairs, and we had no other options." "No other options," I laughed, "but it came out broken. You had the option of asking me. You chose not to." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Family helps family. What's yours is ours." That line stopped me cold. What's yours is ours. They'd said it so many times, and I'd always brushed it off as a joke. But it wasn't a joke, was it? It was the rule they lived by. Later that night, I sat in my room staring at the spreadsheet I kept to track my expenses. The numbers glared back at me: bills, groceries, their insurance, my dad's credit card payment. I'd spent years keeping them afloat, and now they were drowning me with them. I thought of that phrase again. Family helps family. Only in our family, helping meant surrender. A few days later, Ryan started flaunting money. A new watch, new sneakers, even a weekend trip to Vegas for business. He called it an investment, said he was partnering with Dad. "What kind of business?" I asked. He grinned. "You wouldn't understand. It's a family thing." I did understand, though. He was burning through money he didn't earn, and if history had taught me anything, it meant someone else was footing the bill. Probably me. That suspicion turned into certainty a week later when my friend Ava from the accounting firm called. "Hey, Em," she said, "I saw your name pop up on a business registration. Are you freelancing again?" My heart skipped. "What do you mean, Willow Creek Renovations? Registered under your home address." I nearly dropped the phone. My home address. After I hung up, I went straight to the state's business registry website. There it was, Willow Creek Renovations LLC. Owner Ryan Thompson. Business address 1847 Willow Creek Drive. My house. I stormed into the kitchen shaking. Ryan was leaning against the counter eating a sandwich. "Why is my address on your business license?" I demanded. He smirked. "Relax, Em. It's all paperwork. You wouldn't understand how business works. This isn't your address." He shrugged. "It's the family house, isn't it? I just used it for the mail." The casualness of it made me dizzy. The entitlement. The way he said family house like I was the intruder. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice, Dad's voice, all their little phrases that had chipped away at me for years. "You wouldn't understand. You're overreacting. What's yours is ours." A few mornings later, I came home from work and found a thick envelope from the bank on the kitchen table. It was addressed to the Thompson family. Regarding property equity loan. I opened it before I could think. The words blurred for a moment before they sank an application for a home equity line of credit for my house. My name was listed as secondary owner. The signatures at the bottom weren't mine, but they were close enough to fool someone who didn't look too hard. My hands shook so badly the papers slipped from my fingers. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly in the corner, casting red and green over the letter. The whole world looked festive, beautiful, and false. When they came home that night, I was waiting. The letter sat on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. Dad froze when he saw it. "Emily, what are you doing with that? I should be asking you the same thing." Mom's face crumpled. "We didn't mean any harm. You forged my signature. It's not forging if it's family," Dad barked. "Stop saying that," I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "You've used me, lied to me, and now you're trying to steal from me." "From me, Dad." Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs, smirking. "Oh, come on, Em. Don't be dramatic. You've got a good job, no kids, no responsibilities. You'll bounce back." I turned toward him. "You think stealing a house is no big deal. It's not stealing if you don't even want it," he said. Mom started crying, then loud and theatrical. "We did it for the family. You've always had more than us, more than you," I said, almost laughing. "I gave you everything I had." Dad slammed his beer down on the table. "You wouldn't even have a roof if I hadn't helped you pick this place." "Pick this place," I whispered. "You didn't pay a dime." The argument spiraled into chaos, accusations, guilt, noise. I stood there in the middle of it all, watching the people I'd loved twist themselves into something unrecognizable. They weren't ashamed. They weren't even sorry. They truly believed this was fair. When I finally walked out, my ears were ringing. I didn't take my coat, didn't take my keys. I just needed to breathe. The cold air hit my face like a slap. I drove to the park and sat in the car staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked older, harder. Something inside me had shifted for good. By the time I got home, the house was dark. I went straight to my room and opened the locked file cabinet. Inside were the folders, the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, every document that proved what was mine. I laid them out on the bed one by one like armor. I traced my name on the deed with my finger. Emily Carter, my name, not theirs, not shared, mine. For the first time in years, I felt something other than helplessness. I felt clarity. They'd crossed a line they couldn't step back from, and I wasn't going to protect them anymore. The text came the morning after another sleepless night. "Dinner tomorrow. Let's be civil, it's Christmas Eve." Just 7 words from Mom wrapped in fake warmth. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring. Civil. After they forged my name, lied to my face, and called me ungrateful. But something in me, the part that still wanted answers, maybe even closure, decided to go. I baked a pumpkin pie, the same one Mom used to make when I was little. It wasn't forgiveness. It was armor. I told myself I'd sit through dinner, keep the peace, and finally be done with them. When I pulled up to the house that night, snow had begun to fall again. The roof shimmered under the glow of Christmas lights, and the wreath I'd made years ago still hung on the door. For a moment I wondered if they'd even remembered it was mine. Ryan opened the door, grinning like the devil himself. "Well, look who decided to come after all. Try not to ruin dinner this time, okay?" I walked past him without answering. The house smelled like roasted turkey and pine, but beneath it there was something bitter. Something rotten that even candlelight couldn't disguise. Mom came out of the kitchen, apron on, smile too tight. "Emily, I'm so glad you came. Let's make this a good night." Dad followed her, glass of wine in hand. "It's Christmas, Em. No need to dredge up old drama." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Sure, Dad, no drama." The table was set perfectly, of course. Candles, polished silverware, crystal glasses that had belonged to my grandmother. Mom always loved her performances. We all sat down, Dad at the head, Mom beside him, Ryan across from me. Dinner started quietly. They talked about weather, the neighbors, the holiday sales. Ryan bragged about his business ventures, whatever scam he was running this week. Mom praised him like he was the second coming of Christ. "You know, Ryan's been working with investors now," she said proudly. "He's really turning things around." I stabbed a piece of turkey and forced a polite smile. "That's nice." Dad raised his glass. "To family, to unity, and to a prosperous new year." They clinked glasses. I didn't. Then Ryan looked at me, that smirk still plastered on his face. "Some people just don't understand teamwork. But that's okay, we all have our strengths." Mom laughed a little too loudly. Dad chuckled. My throat tightened. I thought of everything they'd taken from me. The forged loan, the credit card debt, the humiliation. My stomach churned. Then Mom said it. "Oh, by the way, honey, we filed the paperwork for the refinance. It should go through after the holidays. Isn't that good news?" My fork froze midair. The room went silent. Dad cleared his throat. "It'll give us all a clean slate." I set my fork down. "You mean it'll give you a clean slate?" "With my name still attached." Mom frowned. "Don't start, Emily." "Start," I whispered. "You forged my signature." "That's not starting, Mom. That's criminal." Ryan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Here we go again. Can we not have one dinner without you playing the victim?" Before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. Mom jumped up, flustered. "Oh, that must be the Burkes." "The Burkes are church friends. Perfect." Within minutes, the dining room was full of cheerful chatter. Plates were passed, wine poured, laughter forced. Mom insisted I stay. "We're all family here," she said, smiling too sweetly. "Let's show them how close we are." I sat still, silent, waiting for the trap to spring. It didn't take long. So Mrs. Burke said politely, "You must be proud of your son's new business." Mom's eyes sparkled. "Oh yes, Ryan's been incredible. He's helped us so much this year, especially with the house." "The house," I said quietly. Mom didn't look at me. "Yes, well, we've been making some changes. It's been complicated, but Emily tends to exaggerate. She's been under a lot of stress lately." Mrs. Burke's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Mom sighed dramatically. She thought we were trying to steal something from her. Can you imagine her own parents? The room laughed softly. Even Ryan smirked. I felt the heat rise up my neck. My chest burned. Dad added, "She's just emotional. Always has been. We love her, of course, but she's sensitive." "Sensitive," I said under my breath. Ryan grinned. "Yeah, Em, don't make everything about you again." That line, the same one he'd thrown at me before. It snapped something inside me. I stood up. The chair scraped back hard against the floor. The laughter died. "You want to tell them the truth," I said, my voice trembling. "Or should I?" Mom blinked. "Emily, sit down. Don't embarrass yourself." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. No, let's do this right. You want to talk about family. Let's talk. I opened my email, pulling up attachments, the forged loan documents, the fake signatures, the bank's confirmation of the fraudulent credit account. I laid my phone flat on the table for everyone to see. These are the papers you signed using my name, I said. You opened credit cards, took out loans, and even tried to steal my house. A gasp went around the table. Mom's hand flew to her chest. That's not true. Dad barked enough. You're lying. I pointed at the screen. You want to see the timestamps, the bank statement, the business registration under my address. Go ahead, tell them I'm lying. The room was silent except for the faint hum of Christmas music still playing in the background. Ryan muttered, "This is ridiculous, is it?" I said. "Because the police don't think so. They called yesterday to verify the forgery." "Do you know what that means, Ryan?" His smirk faltered. Mom's voice shook. "Emily, please, we can fix this." "No," I said softly. "You can't. You've been living off me for years, calling it love. You've taken everything, my money, my home, my peace, and still you want more." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Get out!" I looked him straight in the eye. "Gladly. But when the lights go out tomorrow, remember I paid for those too." I picked up my purse, turned toward the door, and walked out without another word. The cold air outside hit like freedom. Snowflakes clung to my hair, melting down my cheeks like tears I refused to shed. Behind me, I heard muffled shouting, chairs scraping, the clatter of silverware. But it didn't matter anymore. I got into my car, hands trembling as I started the engine. My phone buzzed, text after text. From Mom, "You've broken this family." From Ryan, "You'll regret this." From Dad, "Ungrateful brat." I blocked all 3 numbers. As I drove away, the house shrank in my rear-view mirror, its windows glowing warm against the dark. For years, I'd mistaken that light for love. Now I knew better. At the first red light, I stopped and took a breath. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was something else, relief, power release. The snow was falling harder now, soft and steady, covering everything in white. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my face. "Merry Christmas," I whispered, watching the house disappear behind me. They wanted a home without me. Now they'd find out what it really meant to live without me. The snow was falling hard when I left their house behind. The tires crunched over the frozen road, and the headlights cut through the white blur like 2 narrow blades. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. For a while, I couldn't hear anything but the hum of the engine and my own breath. No music, no Christmas carols, just silence. I'd always thought silence was peaceful, but that night it was sharp. It reminded me of every word they'd said at the dinner table, every lie dressed up as love. "We did it for the family. Don't make everything about you." It replayed in my head until the ache in my chest hardened into something else, resolve. By the time I pulled into a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, I knew what I needed to do. The parking lot was empty except for a single truck idling near the back. Inside, the place was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and the faint sound of Silent Night on an old radio. I slid into a booth by the window, ordered coffee, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit my face as I scrolled through my accounts, the same accounts that had kept their world spinning. Electricity, internet, water, insurance, credit cards, all in my name, all connected to them. One by one, I started to cut them off. The electricity first. Click. Cancelled. No more warmth they didn't pay for. Internet next. Click. Disconnected. Let them sit in the dark with no one to post their fake smiles to. Water. Click. Stopped service. Let them see how quickly comfort dries up when the faucet doesn't obey. Insurance. Click. Gone. The car they drove without a thought, now uninsured. Each click was quiet, but in my head it thundered. Every confirmation email felt like a small exhale, a piece of me being returned. For years I'd been the current running through their lives. They'd never even noticed. But tonight I was cutting the power. When I finished, I just sat there, staring at the screen. The reflection of my face looked unfamiliar, not angry, not broken, just awake. The waitress refilled my coffee and smiled softly. "Rough night," I almost laughed. "Something like that." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe every woman does in her own way. I didn't sleep that night. I drove to a small roadside motel, checked into a room that smelled faintly of detergent and cheap pine cleaner, and watched the snow fall through the window. I'd thought revenge would feel explosive, but it didn't. It felt quiet, clean, like breathing after years of holding it in. The next week passed in silence. No calls, no contact. I spent the days updating my resume, looking for new jobs, even considering moving out of state. For the first time in years, my choices were my own. Then the phone rang. "Miss Carter, this is Linda from Maple Bank. I just wanted to confirm some details regarding your mortgage account." My heart skipped. "Is something wrong?" "Oh no, nothing wrong at all," she said, her voice warm and matter-of-fact. "I just wanted to verify ownership information. Your name is the only one listed on the property title. There were recent attempts to file a change, but the documents were rejected for lack of authorization." I gripped the phone tighter. "So, they tried to transfer the deed?" "Yes, but don't worry. It's been flagged. You're the sole owner." For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I let out a breath that came out half laugh, half sigh. "Thank you, Linda. You have no idea how much that means." When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the carpet. My parents had tried to steal my house, but the system they'd underestimated had stopped them. It wasn't luck. It was foresight. It was every late night I'd spent filing documents, paying bills, keeping records. They'd called me controlling obsessive, but it was those very habits that saved me. And now I had proof. That evening I checked my phone. 60 missed calls, most from Mom. A few from Ryan. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove past the house. It was dark, completely dark. No Christmas lights twinkling in the windows, no glow from the living room where the tree used to stand. Just blackness. I parked across the street and watched for a minute. Then I saw the silhouettes inside moving by flashlight. Dad's figure at the window pacing. Mom shouting something toward Ryan. The sight should have broken my heart. But it didn't. It made me feel free. I whispered Merry Christmas and drove away. The next morning, the voicemails started coming. Emily, Mom's voice cracked. "We can't get the heat to work. Please, it's freezing." Another. "Your father's trying to get the power company to fix it, but they said the account's been closed. You need to call them." Then, Ryan's voice harsh and furious. "You think you're clever. You're gonna regret this. We'll get it back." I deleted each message without listening to the end. The final one came late that night. Mom again, quieter this time. "We're sorry. Just call me okay, please." I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and didn't pick it up again. For years I'd believed that love meant rescuing people even when they didn't deserve it. But love without respect isn't love at all. It's servitude. I made tea and sat by the window watching the snow swirl against the glass. The motel heater hummed softly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt warm. I pulled out my notebook, the one I used for work, for budgeting, for planning, and began to write. Not numbers this time, but words. Thoughts. Truths I'd never said out loud. I was raised to believe that loyalty meant silence, I wrote. But silence is what abusers feed on. I can forgive them, but I won't feed them anymore. The next page I wrote something else. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's control. I sat there staring at that sentence until the meaning sank deep, because that's what this was: control reclaimed inch by inch. A few days later, I received an email from Maple Bank. They were opening an investigation into the forged loan application. They'd need a statement from me and copies of the documents I'd saved. I smiled. Finally, the truth was catching up. I attached the files, signed the statement, and hit send. When I closed the laptop, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I didn't look like the same woman who'd left her parents' house a week ago. There was a steadiness in my eyes now, a quiet fire. They'd taken so much from me, but they'd also given me something they never expected: the freedom to start again. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world looked still and clean, like a fresh page waiting to be written on. I wrapped my blanket tighter and whispered to myself, they thought I'd crawl back begging for forgiveness. But this time I have nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was pouring myself a cup of coffee in the motel room. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Miss Carter, this is Linda from Maple Bank again. I wanted to thank you for sending those documents. We've completed our initial review, and well, there's more here than we expected." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "What do you mean more?" "There were multiple fraudulent applications tied to your information," she said. "A refinance request, a credit extension, and even a vehicle loan filed in your name. All traced back to the same IP address. You did the right thing coming forward. The case has now been escalated to our fraud division and law enforcement has been notified." For a moment I couldn't speak. The room seemed to hum around me, the old heater rattling against the wall. "Law enforcement?" I repeated quietly. "Yes. Don't worry, you're not under investigation," Linda said quickly. "You're the victim here, but I thought you should know things are moving fast." I thanked her and hung up, setting the mug down before my hands spilled it. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt the familiar ache of disbelief. My family hadn't just lied, they'd built an entire web of deceit, strand by strand, and I'd been trapped in the middle of it. Later that afternoon, I had a video call with a bank investigator named Miss Reyes. She was sharp-eyed, efficient, and kind in that way people are when they've seen too many victims before. "Let's go through the signatures first," she said, sharing her screen. "This one's yours, correct?" I nodded. "And this," she clicked to another form, "was submitted digitally 3 weeks ago. It lists your name as a co-signer." The signature looked close, almost perfect, but I could see it. The slight curl in the R, the uneven spacing in the T of Carter. Ryan's handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, on sticky notes left on the fridge, on his stupid to-do lists that I used to tease him about. Miss Reyes looked up. "We confirmed that the submission came from a notary account registered under your brother's email address. There's also a record of him uploading a copy of your driver's license." My throat tightened. "He stole my ID, likely scanned from documents you had at home," she said gently. "I know this is hard, but you did everything right, keeping records, storing originals. Most people don't. You just saved yourself a lawsuit." Her words echoed in my head long after the call ended. You saved yourself. It was strange to realize how close I'd come to losing everything, to being erased completely, not just from their family, but from my own life. That night, I sat on the motel bed, with the lights off, watching the snow fall outside. Each flake caught in the glow of the streetlight before disappearing into darkness. They'd tried to destroy me, and for the first time I finally understood something. They hadn't done it out of need. They'd done it out of entitlement. Because they believed I'd always be there to clean up their messes. Not anymore. The next few days passed in quiet waves. I went for long walks, applied for remote work, bought groceries with cash. The silence of the motel room no longer felt lonely, it felt earned. Then the chaos began. On Thursday morning, my voicemail filled up within hours. Emily Mom's voice cracked through the speaker. "They froze our checking account. They said, "There's some kind of fraud alert. Please call the bank and fix it." The next one was, "Ryan furious. What the hell did you do? You think you can screw us over and just walk away? You're insane." Then Dad. His tone was tired, defeated. They're saying we can't access the savings account. You know we need that money. Please, sweetheart, don't do this. I didn't reply to any of them. By that evening, there were 27 missed calls. By the next day, 40. I sat by the window drinking tea and listened to each one once before deleting it. Every message sounded like a different stage of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, but never accountability. Not once did anyone say, "We're sorry." 2 nights later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past the house just after sunset. The Christmas lights were still up, but the house was dark. No hum from the heater, no soft glow in the windows, just a cold shell against the snow. For a second, I saw Dad standing at the window, flashlight in hand, scanning through mail. Then Ryan appeared behind him, shouting. Mom was in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, crying. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was distance. The kind of distance that isn't measured in miles but in clarity. I whispered, "You built this," before driving away. The next morning, I met with a property lawyer, Mr. Green, the one the bank recommended. His office was small and smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. He flipped through my folder of documents, nodding occasionally. "You kept meticulous records," he said. "That's rare." "I had to," I said quietly. "No one else ever did." He looked up, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Carter, you have nothing to worry about. Legally, you're the sole owner of the property. In fact, what your family attempted could qualify as felony-level fraud." The word felony hung in the air. He leaned forward. "If you want to press charges, you have a strong case. You could sue for damages, recover your losses." I stared at the papers between us. "I don't know if I can do that," I said. "They're still my parents." "Justice doesn't have to be loud," he said softly. "It just has to be done." When I left his office, the cold air felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't sure yet what I'd decide, but for once the choice was mine alone. Over the weekend, the story started to spread. I heard it in whispers at the grocery store, saw it in the pitying looks from people who used to smile politely and move on. I heard the Thompson's daughter actually owns that house, one woman murmured near the produce aisle. "Really, I thought they said it was theirs," another replied. "Well, not anymore. Banks involved. Something about fraud." For years, I'd been invisible, just the quiet daughter who paid the bills. Now people finally knew the truth. But instead of pride, I felt something else, sadness. I hadn't wanted revenge to make me famous. I just wanted peace. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed and opened my phone. Mom's last text blinked on the screen. "Please come home. We can fix this." I typed a reply. "Home isn't a place that steals from you," and then deleted it. Some things don't need to be said. I turned off the phone, closed my eyes, and listened to the hum of the heater. For the first time, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat returning to its natural pace. I realized then that revenge hadn't consumed me. It had freed me. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped saving them. When I looked out the window again, the snow had stopped falling. The world outside looked clean and untouched, as if it were daring me to begin again. They'd always said I was too quiet to fight back. But they never understood that silence can be powerful. And this time my silence spoke louder than their entire house full of lies. The world finally saw the truth, but the truth had a price. And the bill was still coming due. The email came early in the morning, just as the sun was spilling weak light across the motel curtains. The subject line read, "Urgent confirmation required. Secondary accounts." I almost ignored it, thinking it was spam. But the sender's name, Miss Reyes, Maple Bank Fraud Division, made my stomach tighten. The message was short, clinical. the kind of tone that only sounds calm because it's hiding chaos underneath. Miss Carter, during the course of our investigation, we identified several linked financial accounts in your name. These accounts date back several years. Please confirm whether you opened them personally. Several years. I clicked the attachment, my hand trembling as the document loaded. There were 6 accounts listed. 2 credit lines, 1 small business account, and a savings account, opened in 2018, the same year my parents moved into my house. I sat back in the chair, staring at the date until the numbers blurred. 2018. Not recent. Not Ryan. It had started long before. For a few minutes I couldn't move. The air felt heavy, thick, with the kind of realization that changes everything you thought you knew. I'd spent weeks hating Ryan for what he'd done, for dragging my parents into it. But now it was clear he hadn't dragged them anywhere. They'd all been walking in the same direction for years. I drove straight to the Maple Bank branch in town. The parking lot was half empty, the sidewalks slick with melting snow. Inside, the manager recognized my name immediately. His face tightened. "Ah, yes, Miss Carter," he said, guiding me into a small office. "You've been listed as a co-signer on these accounts for quite some time. Since 2018, actually." He slid a folder across the desk. The paper smelled faintly of ink and cold air. My name was printed neatly at the top of each page, followed by a looping, almost perfect version of my signature. Almost. It wasn't mine. The lines curved too smoothly, the spacing too wide. But in the witness signature column, I saw something else. My father's handwriting. The room tilted. Mr. Thompson was the witness I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes," the manager said carefully. "It's all in compliance with the form requirements." "But Miss Carter, if these are indeed forgeries, we'll need to escalate immediately." My throat felt dry. "Please do." As I left, the bank memories began to flood back. My father, asking for my ID to set up utilities. Mom saying she'd handle some paperwork for the insurance the way they always brushed me off when I asked about mail addressed to Emily. Carter Thompson. I'd thought I was helping them start over. But really, I'd been signing my future away, one favor at a time. I met with Mr. Green, my lawyer, that afternoon. He studied the papers in silence for several minutes before speaking. "This is bad," he said finally. "Your father and brother opened at least 3 lines of credit in your name to fund Ryan's business ventures." "How much?" I asked. He hesitated. "About $80,000. 80,000. The number hit me like a slap. I laughed, an ugly, disbelieving sound. 80,000. They said they were broke. He nodded grimly. They were. Because they kept using your name to stay afloat. And the banks let it happen because your credit was spotless. I pressed my hands to my temples. So what happens now? We'll cooperate with the bank and the investigators. Given the documentation you've provided, they'll pursue criminal charges. You could also file a civil claim for damages. I stared at him. You're saying I could sue my family? He didn't blink. Yes, and you'd win. I shook my head slowly. I don't want to see them in prison. Mr. Green leaned forward, voice softening. You didn't put them there, Miss Carter. They walked there themselves. That night my phone rang again. Mom's number. For a long moment I just watched it light up, my reflection flickering in the dark screen. Finally I answered. Her voice came through, shaky, desperate. Emily, please. We didn't know Ryan took it that far. He's out of control. Mom, I said quietly. The accounts date back to 2018. Silence. Then she stammered, I told your father we shouldn't have used your signature again. Again. I felt my whole body go cold. You just said again? I didn't mean it like that. Don't lie to me. My voice broke sharp and raw. You knew. You and Dad knew exactly what was happening. She started to cry, a sound I'd once rushed to comfort. Now it grated like nails on glass. We were just trying to save the family, Emily. We thought once Ryan's business took off, we could pay it back. We never meant to hurt you. I closed my eyes. You didn't want to save the family. You wanted to save yourselves. Emily, please, I hung up. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, but I didn't answer. I sat on the bed, clutching the phone in one hand, tears streaming down my face, not from pain, but from finality. There was no fixing this. Later that night, I went through my documents again. Every folder, every envelope, looking for something, anything they might have hidden. That's when I found a bank statement from a joint savings account I didn't recognize. The name on it made my chest tighten. Margaret Carter Estate. My grandmother's name. She'd passed away years ago, leaving behind a small inheritance. I'd been told there wasn't much left, that it had all gone toward her medical bills. But this account told a different story. It was opened in both my name and my father's. And over the years, the balance had dwindled, the withdrawals made in steady intervals, each one signed by him. It wasn't just my money they'd stolen. It was my grandmother's gift, the one thing she'd left for me. I traced the faded letters on the paper, whispering, "You even took what she left me." The grief that followed wasn't loud. It didn't come in sobs or shouting. It came like a tide, quiet, heavy, pulling everything with it. By morning, I'd made my decision. I returned to Mr. Green's office, placed the new evidence on his desk, and said, "Do whatever you have to. Cooperate with the bank, with the police. I'm done protecting them." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "You'll need to testify when the case moves forward." "I will," I said. My voice didn't shake. As I stood to leave, he added, "It takes strength to hold your line, Miss Carter. Remember that." Outside, the air was crisp, almost painfully clear. Snow glittered on the sidewalks untouched. For once, I felt the same clean, resolute, untouched by their lies. They had stolen my name, my house, even my inheritance, but they couldn't steal the truth anymore. And this time, the truth had witnesses. The call from Mr. Green came just after sunrise. His tone was steady but carried that careful weight lawyers use when they know what's coming next. "Emily," he said, "they've hired counsel. Their attorney wants to arrange a meeting before the hearing. Pre-negotiation, maybe settlement. You don't have to go, but you think I should," I finished for him. He hesitated. "Sometimes closure is best served face to face." I looked out the motel window. The parking lot was coated in thin ice, the kind that gleams like glass but shatters under pressure. I thought about all the things I wanted to say, how I'd rehearsed them for years, but never had the courage. "Set it up," I said. "Let's finish this." The courthouse was 2 hours away, in the same town where I'd built my life and lost it. The closer I got, the more it felt like driving through a memory I'd already buried. The snow along the highway had started to melt, leaving streaks of gray slush like winter itself was too tired to keep pretending. When I walked into the mediation room, they were already there. My parents sat on one side of the long table, Ryan beside them. I almost didn't recognize them at first. They looked smaller, somehow older. Even Ryan, his expensive jacket, couldn't hide the tension in his jaw. A court mediator stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 lawyers. Mr. Green gave me a small nod. I took my seat opposite my family. The air in the room felt heavy, like it was made of glass ready to crack. "Thank you all for coming," the mediator began. "We're here to discuss a potential settlement before this case proceeds further. This is not a formal hearing, but rather a chance for both parties to speak freely." My father's attorney smiled tightly. "The Thompsons are deeply remorseful for what's happened. They'd like to find a path forward to reconcile, if possible." Mr. Green leaned forward, voice like steel. "My client isn't here for reconciliation. She's here for accountability." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint ticking of the wall clock. I felt their eyes on me, my mother's watery pleading, my father's guarded, Ryan's cold and defiant. The mediator gestured toward me. "Miss Carter, would you like to begin?" I nodded and opened the folder in front of me. The papers inside were neatly organized bank statements, forged contracts, inheritance records, every lie printed in black and white. I laid them out one by one. These, I said quietly, are the accounts you opened in my name. The loans you signed with forged signatures. The credit cards you maxed out using my identity. And these, I slid forward another set of documents, are the withdrawals from Grandma Margaret's inheritance, the one she left for my future. You drained it. My father shifted in his chair. We were desperate, Emily. No, I said sharply. You were greedy. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for a tissue. We never meant to hurt you. We just wanted to keep the family together. I met her eyes. You don't keep a family together by tearing one person apart. Ryan snorted. Oh, come on. You act like you're a saint. You think you're better than us because you've got a steady job and a mortgage. I looked at him calm and clear. No, Ryan, I just think I finally remember who I am. The mediator raised a hand. Let's stay civil, please. But the civility was already gone. Dad leaned forward. You think this makes you strong, dragging your family through the mud. I think it makes me free, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm not paying for your mistakes. The mediator turned to Mr. Green. Perhaps you can clarify your client's position. Mr. Green nodded. The bank's investigation has confirmed multiple instances of fraud. Charges are pending. My client is open to a settlement only if full restitution is made, including repayment of the inheritance funds and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Their lawyer spoke up, his tone careful. Surely there's room for compassion here. They've suffered enough, Mr. Green cut him off. My client already gave them compassion. It was repaid with theft. Ryan slammed his palm against the table. You'll regret this when you're alone, Emily. You've got no one left now. I turned to him, my voice steady. I've been alone my whole life. The difference is now I'm at peace with it. Mom started sobbing, her face buried in her hands. Dad just stared down at the table, jaw tight, refusing to look at me. For years I would have given anything to hear him say he was proud of me. Now I realized he never would, and it didn't matter anymore. The mediator wrapped up the session. I think we've said enough for today. As everyone began to stand, my mother reached for me. Emily, please, she whispered. We're still your parents. We can fix this. I looked at her for a long time. Her eyes were red, her lipstick smudged, the same woman who once tucked me into bed and told me goodnight. But the person standing in front of me wasn't the mother I remembered. You didn't mean to hurt me, I said quietly. You just didn't care if you did. She flinched. I turned and walked out of the room. The hallway was lined with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. My heels clicked against the tile, each step louder than the last. Mr. Green caught up with me at the exit. You handled that perfectly, he said. I nodded, though my throat was tight. It didn't feel perfect. He gave me a small smile. Justice rarely does. That night I was back in my motel room when the phone rang again. It was Miss Reyes from Maple Bank. Miss Carter, she said, I wanted to let you know the investigation is complete. The documents you provided were crucial. You've been officially cleared of any responsibility. Your family will be held accountable. I sat there in silence, staring at the ceiling. So it's over. As far as the bank's concerned, yes. The next step is with the authorities. You did the right thing. Did I whispered. She paused. Most people don't find the courage to do what you did. After we hung up, I turned off all the lights and stood by the window. Outside, the snow had started again, soft and slow, falling over the world like forgiveness that comes too late. Justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. I packed my things the next morning. The motel room looked strange without my few belongings, like I'd never been there at all. I loaded the last box into my car, then sat for a moment before turning the key. On the drive home, the radio played an old country song about second chances. I didn't sing along, but I smiled at the irony. There are no second chances for people who refuse to change. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. No shared names on the lease, no borrowed bills, no hidden traps. Just quiet. Clean quiet. I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker in the snow. For the first time in months, my reflection didn't look like a stranger. They built their lies with my name, I whispered. I rebuilt my life with their silence. Later that night, I called Mr. Green one last time to thank him. You stood by yourself, Emily, he said. I just watched you do it. After we hung up, I sat in bed with a cup of tea and breathed in the stillness. The kind of stillness that means the storm is over, even if the air still smells like rain. They had taken everything they could, my money, my trust, my past, but they would never touch my future. The truth had taken everything from me, but it had also set me free. And freedom, I was learning, is the most expensive gift of all. The package arrived on a Thursday morning, small enough to fit through the slot in my door. I almost didn't notice it at first, just a plain brown envelope with my name written in fading ink. There was no return address, only a seal from the Maple County Registrar's office. I slid it open with the edge of a kitchen knife. Inside was another envelope, this one thicker, older, the paper yellowed around the edges. On the front, in careful cursive, it said, "To be opened by Emily Carter in the event of suspicion or dispute." My grandmother's handwriting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She'd been gone nearly 7 years. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at it, my hands trembling. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a small stack of ledgers bound together with twine. The first page of the letter read, "If you're reading this, Emily, it means they've done to you what they did to me." The words hit me like a blow. I unfolded the rest of the letter. Her handwriting wavered with age, but every sentence carried that familiar firmness, the voice of the only person who'd ever told me the truth, even when it hurt. Your father's charm was always his weapon. Your mother's silence was his shield. Ryan learned from both. There are records here from the company. Keep them safe. You'll need them one day. And when that day comes, remember the truth always outlives the lies. My eyes burned as I laid the papers out on the table. The ledgers were old but meticulous columns of numbers, client payments, handwritten notes in the margins. One name appeared again and again, Thompson Contracting. Dad's old company. He'd always said it failed because of bad luck and greedy investors. But the documents told another story. There were transactions marked as insurance transfers followed by withdrawals that matched dates of company accidents. Cross-reference names showed checks made out to fake contractors' accounts, opened and closed within weeks. It wasn't bad luck, it was fraud. As I flipped through the final pages, a familiar name appeared in newer ink. Ryan Thompson, Operations Manager. He would have been 21 then. I sat there for hours, piecing together the timeline. My father's downfall hadn't been the end of his schemes. It was the beginning of a new one. When the business collapsed, he'd shifted his tactics, using his own family as collateral. And I was the final phase. I whispered to myself. It wasn't an accident. It was a business model. That night, I called Miss Reyes from the bank. She answered on the second ring. "Miss Carter, I was just reviewing some additional documentation from the investigation." "How are you holding up? I've seen enough lies to last a lifetime," I said. "But I think I've found something that connects all of it." I told her about the ledgers, my grandmother's letter, the financial trail that dated back over a decade. There was a pause on the line. "Emily," she said slowly, "we've seen records like these before. Your father's company was under federal investigation 10 years ago for insurance and loan fraud. The case was closed after a settlement. Who paid the settlement?" I asked, though part of me already knew. According to our records, she replied the funds came from a private estate account under the name Margaret Carter. Your grandmother. The room went still. My grandmother had paid for his crimes to protect the family name, and when she died, they took what was left to rebuild their facade. Miss Reyes's voice softened. I'm so sorry, but this strengthens your case. It shows a pattern of premeditated fraud. You're not just a victim of opportunity, you were targeted. After we hung up, I sat by the window staring at the snow-covered streets below. My reflection looked like someone I barely recognized, older, sharper, less afraid. The next day, I drove to the old industrial district where my father's company had once stood. The building was gone, replaced by a frozen lot dotted with weeds poking through the snow. The chain-link fence sagged under the weight of ice. I got out of the car and walked to the gate. The air smelled faintly of rust and ash. I remembered coming here as a little girl watching Dad shout orders, charm clients, pat workers on the back. I used to think he was a king building something that would last forever. Now all that remained was an empty field. I took the letter from my grandmother out of my coat pocket. Her last words glimmered faintly in the sunlight. The truth always outlives the lies. I knelt down and left the letter by the gate, pressing it into the snow. For closure, not forgiveness, I whispered. As I stood, the wind picked up scattering flakes across the ground like confetti at the funeral of everything false. Back at my apartment that night, I went through the remaining envelope from the package. Inside was a final bank statement dated just months before my grandmother's death. The balance showed a modest sum under an account titled Margaret Carter Trust, with my name listed as co-beneficiary. There had been a second inheritance, one they never found. The account still existed. The number was still active. I called the bank the next morning to verify it. The woman on the other end confirmed it with a small note of surprise. Yes, Miss Carter, the account is secure. Current balance is $44,812. It wasn't a fortune. But after everything they'd taken, it felt like justice with interest. I thanked her and hung up, tears blurring my vision. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. Just grateful to my grandmother for protecting something pure from the rot that had spread through the rest of our family. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what to do with it. I could move somewhere new, start over, disappear completely. But when I closed my eyes, I thought about the women I'd met during the investigation. Other victims of family fraud, women who'd been told they were crazy, dramatic, ungrateful. That's when I knew. I opened my laptop and began drafting a plan, a nonprofit fund, to provide legal assistance to victims of financial abuse inside families. I'd call it Margaret's Haven. It felt right, using the last of my grandmother's legacy to protect others the way she'd tried to protect me. A week later, I drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of town. The sky was pale and low, the kind of winter gray that made everything look softer, quieter. Her gravestone was simple: Margaret Louise Carter, 1932, 2018. Beloved mother, grandmother, and truth-teller. I brushed the snow from the stone and laid a white rose at its base. You always said the truth would outlive the lies, I murmured. You were right. It did. For a moment, I stood there, listening to the silence, the wind whispering through the bare trees. Then I turned to leave, feeling lighter than I had in months. As I walked back to the car, snow began to fall again, soft, gentle, endless. The past had been their business. The future was mine. And this time it would be built on truth. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. It was barely 7 a.m., and the sky outside was a dull winter gray. The screen was lit with a dozen notifications, text messages, emails, missed calls. My stomach tightened before I even opened them. The first message was from a former coworker, Emily. I just saw the news. Are you okay? The next one came with a link. I tapped it, and there it was, the headline I'd been both waiting for and dreading. Local family faces fraud charges in multi-year investigation. The article laid everything bare. My parents' names. My brothers, the list of charges. Financial fraud, identity theft. Forgery wire fraud. My name appeared only once, a footnote under the words victim and primary whistleblower. I read it twice, letting each line sink in. The FBI had raided their house at dawn. Investigators had recovered forged documents, false tax filings, and digital evidence linking Ryan to the fraudulent accounts. The image of their home filled the screen, police tape, flashing lights, a reporter standing in front of the house I once called mine. For a long time, I just sat there staring at it. I'd imagined justice 1,000 different ways: courtroom applause, dramatic apologies, maybe even peace. But justice wasn't loud. It was quiet. It came in headlines and silence. By noon, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, neighbors, strangers, even distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to hear my side. I ignored them all. Then the voicemails started. Mom's voice was the first, shaky and broken. "Emily, I don't know what to say. We didn't mean for this to happen. Please don't let them take your father away. We're your parents. We love you." The second was Dad's, harsh and defensive. "You've destroyed this family. Congratulations. I hope you're proud." Ryan's message came last. "You think this is over. You've got no idea what you've started. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts." I deleted all three. Justice doesn't always feel like revenge. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, like the air has finally stopped vibrating after years of holding your breath. A week later, Mr. Green called. "Emily, they've set a preliminary hearing date. You'll need to testify," I figured I said. "They'll try to paint this as a family misunderstanding," he warned. "But the evidence speaks for itself. You just have to tell your truth. You've been doing that all along." The courthouse was cold the morning of the hearing. Pale light filtered through high windows, glinting off the polished floors. My heels echoed as I walked down the hall toward the courtroom, heart steady, breath even. When I stepped inside, I saw them. My parents sat at the defense table, thinner than I remembered. Dad's once perfect posture had collapsed into a hunch. Mom's hair was gray at the roots, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ryan sat beside them, staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, wearing the same expression he'd worn since childhood, the smug look of a man who still believed he could talk his way out of anything. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The prosecutor spoke first, laying out the evidence piece by piece. Copies of forged signatures, loan applications, inheritance transfers, bank logs, emails. Each item was a brick in the wall they'd built around me, and now that wall was crumbling. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, palms slightly damp, and walked to the witness stand. The prosecutor's voice was calm. "Miss Carter, can you describe when you first realized your identity had been used without your consent?" "Yes," I said. "It was the day my parents told me to leave the house I paid for." A murmur rippled through the gallery. As I spoke, I could feel Ryan's eyes burning into me. I didn't look at him. I told the court everything: the forged accounts, the hidden inheritance, the years of manipulation disguised as family loyalty. When the prosecutor asked why I finally came forward, I said the only thing that felt true. Because silence protects the guilty, not the innocent. The room went completely still. Even the judge paused, pen hovering over the paper. When it was over, I stepped down from the stand, my knees weak but my heart steady. Weeks later, the verdict arrived. Ryan and my father were convicted on multiple counts of fraud and identity theft, both sentenced to several years in prison. My mother received probation and was ordered to pay restitution. The court called her emotionally coerced, though I knew better. The house was seized by the bank, their assets frozen. The empire they'd built on lies had finally collapsed. I drove by once just to see it. The yard was overgrown, the windows dark, a for sale sign half buried in snow. I sat there for a few minutes, engine running, then whispered, "You got what you wanted, a life without me." I didn't feel joy, just closure. A few days later, the local paper published another article. The headline read, "Daughter's Courage Exposes Family Fraud, a Story of Truth and Survival." Some people praised me. Others said I'd gone too far. That family should forgive, not destroy. But forgiveness and denial are cousins, and I'd spent enough of my life feeding them both. Months passed before I received a letter from the prison. It was from my father. "Emily," it read, "I never meant to hurt you. Everything I built was for you. You've misunderstood everything." He asked to see me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The visiting room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. The glass between us was streaked with fingerprints. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. His hair was thin, his skin pale, but his eyes, those same calculating eyes, hadn't changed. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. "I built everything for you," he said again. I held the receiver loosely. "You built it on lies," I said. "That's why it fell." He stared at me silent for a long moment. "Do you hate me?" I looked at him through the glass, the man who'd taught me to doubt myself, to question my worth. "No," I said finally. "I just don't belong to you anymore." Before he could reply, I hung up the phone and walked out. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft pink streaks. The air smelled like rain. For the first time in years, I felt light. Back home, I poured my energy into the one thing that made sense, Margaret's Haven. The fund I'd built in my grandmother's name was beginning to grow. Women from across the state reached out, daughters, mothers, wives, who'd been financially controlled or manipulated by family. I listened to every story, helped where I could. Some nights I'd sit by the office window long after dark, reading letters from women who'd finally broken free. Every word felt like a piece of my own healing stitched back together. Justice hadn't rebuilt what I lost. It had built something new, something honest. One night, as I closed the last file and turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window. There were lines around my eyes now, a few silver strands in my hair. But I looked strong, whole. For the first time, I whispered the truth without anger. They thought I destroyed the family, but I only tore down the lies they mistook for love. And as the city lights shimmered against the glass, I realized that freedom doesn't come from erasing the past. It comes from outliving it. 6 months had passed since the sentencing, and life had finally fallen quiet. My apartment smelled like coffee and sunlight. The plants on the windowsill leaned toward the morning light, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake up to chaos. No court dates, no voicemails, no lawyers' calls. Just the sound of my own breathing and the hum of peace. I should have felt free. But sometimes, even peace felt heavy. The anger had faded, but it left behind a hollow space I didn't know how to fill. Some nights I'd sit by the window, a book open in my lap, and realize I hadn't turned a page in hours. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was the echo of everything. I'd survived, a quiet reminder that even victory leaves scars. On the table sat a box of letters from women I'd helped through Margaret's Haven. One wrote, "Because of you, I left the man who drained my savings and my spirit." Another said, "I thought I was crazy, but now I know I wasn't alone." Their gratitude warmed me, but each thank you also whispered a question I couldn't ignore. Had I really moved on, or had I just built new walls around my pain? Justice had given me closure, but forgiveness, that still terrified me. Then one morning a letter came in the mail. The handwriting was familiar before I even saw the return address. Mom. I stared at it for hours before opening it. The paper trembled in my hands, smelling faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. Emily, it began, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understand. What we did. What I let happen. Your father always said he was protecting us, and I believed him. I believed him because it was easier than seeing the truth. I see it now. I see you. I'm sorry. The letter went on rambling between guilt and regret, apology and explanation. She wrote about working part-time at a diner, about the small apartment she shared with a friend, about missing me every day. When I finished reading, I folded the letter neatly and set it aside. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there feeling something shift quietly inside me. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. It was a slow unbinding, a decision, made not once but over and over every time the memory tried to bite again. 2 weeks later, I drove back to my hometown. It felt strange, like visiting a dream that had gone stale. The streets were narrower than I remembered, the trees smaller, the people older. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, somehow like the town had finally exhaled. When I reached the old neighborhood, I parked across from the house where everything had begun and ended. It looked lifeless. The paint peeled from the shutters, the porch sagged, the for sale sign tilted sideways in the dirt. For years, that house had been a fortress, the symbol of their success, their pride, their control. Now it was just wood and dust. I walked to the gate and stood there for a long time, my breath fogging in the cold air. Flashbacks came in waves, Dad teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway. Mom humming while hanging Christmas lights. The night she told me to pack my things and leave. The memories didn't stab anymore. They just lingered. I whispered to the house, "You don't own me anymore." A gust of wind swept through the yard, carrying the smell of winter. I bent down, picked up a small stone from the path and slipped it into my pocket, not as a keepsake of pain, but as proof I'd survived what this place had tried to bury me with. A week later, another letter arrived, this time from my father's lawyer. He wanted to see me. His health was failing in prison. He'd asked for a transfer to a medical facility and requested one final visit. I spent 3 days deciding. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, the part that had once begged for his approval, whispered that maybe I needed to look him in the eyes one last time. So I went. The prison was gray and echoing, its corridors filled with the hum of distant voices and the clang of locked doors. The visiting room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. When they brought him out, I barely recognized him. His shoulders were hunched, his hair thin and white. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone behind the glass. I lifted mine slowly. He looked at me with eyes I didn't remember, tired, hollow, stripped of pride. "Emily," he rasped, "I'm sorry." The words hung there, fragile and strange. "I thought I was protecting the family," he said. "Everything I did for you." I studied him carefully. Once those words would have broken me. Now they just felt like echoes of a lie he still needed to believe. "You weren't protecting the family," I said softly. "You were protecting your pride. There's a difference." He swallowed hard, blinking fast. "Do you hate me?" I looked at him, the man who'd built his kingdom on my name and watched it burn without blinking. The man who'd taught me how to survive and then punished me for doing it too well. "No," I said finally. "I just don't belong to you anymore." His lips trembled. He opened his mouth, but I hung up the phone before he could speak again. I stood and walked out, my heels clicking against the floor like punctuation marks to a story that had dragged on too long. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. The sky stretched wide and blue, and for a moment I just stood there breathing, really breathing. That night back home, I lit a single candle on my table, a small flame flickering against the dark. It wasn't for him. It was for me, for Grandma, for every woman who'd been silenced, doubted, erased. I opened my journal and wrote, "Revenge gave me justice. Forgiveness gave me rest." Then I took the last of my father's letters, the ones I'd kept tucked in a drawer out of habit, and fed them to the flame. The paper curled and blackened, the words turning to smoke. I watched it drift upward, disappearing into nothing, my apartment filled with soft light and the faint smell of burnt paper. For the first time, the air felt truly clear. The next morning, my phone rang. It was a young woman from Margaret's Haven, a new client I'd spoken with once briefly. Her voice shook. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Your story gave me courage. I'm testifying against my husband tomorrow. I was terrified, but then I thought of what you did." Tears pricked my eyes. "You're stronger than you think," I told her. After the call, I sat there for a while, staring out at the sunrise. Gold light poured through the curtains, warm and steady. I realized then that my grandmother's legacy wasn't just the money she'd left me. It was the strength to choose truth even when it burned. I once believed revenge was the end of the story, but forgiveness was what let the story keep going. They may never say they're sorry, but I don't need them to. My peace doesn't depend on their apology. It lives in my forgiveness. The waves outside my window were the first thing I heard that morning. Soft, steady, familiar. The gulls called over the water and sunlight poured through the curtains, warming the hardwood floor. My coffee pot hissed in the kitchen, and for a moment I just stood there barefoot, wrapped in quiet. It had been a year since everything fell apart, and somehow everything had fallen into place. My new home sat on a small stretch of coastline where the sea met the cliffs. It wasn't grand or impressive, just 2 rooms, a porch, and enough space for peace. The kind of place where silence wasn't punishment anymore. I brewed my coffee and stepped outside, letting the salt air wrap around me. My garden was small, but thriving lavender mint, a single stubborn rose bush that refused to die, no matter the storms. The wind carried the smell of earth and ocean, and I realized that this was the first time in my life I'd woken up somewhere that felt like mine. Not inherited, not borrowed, not shared out of guilt. Mine. When people asked why I moved here, I told them I wanted quiet. But the truth was, I needed space big enough for forgiveness to breathe. A car pulled up in the gravel driveway just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I saw her step out, sharp suit, soft smile, I couldn't help but grin. "Miss Reyes," I said. "You came all this way?" She laughed, holding up a paper bag. "I brought coffee and pastries. I figured you wouldn't turn me away." We sat on the porch watching the water. She'd been my lifeline, once the woman who turned my chaos into justice. Seeing her now felt like seeing a chapter close. "I heard about the nonprofit," she said. "Margaret's Haven, right? You've done good work, Emily. Real work." I shrugged, but she wasn't having it. "Don't downplay it. You've helped a lot of women get their lives back." I looked out at the horizon, the sun glinting off the water. It started as therapy, turned into purpose. She smiled. "That's usually how healing works." We talked for an hour about her new cases, about the final closure of my family's bankruptcy filings, about how time somehow makes even the ugliest stories fade around the edges. Before she left, she turned to me and said, "You didn't just survive them, Emily. You transformed them. You turned greed into grace." Her words stayed with me long after her car disappeared down the road. That night, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the letter I'd written months ago, the one I never sent. The envelope was soft now, its edges worn from being handled too many times. My mother's name sat in faded ink across the front. I unfolded the paper and read the words I'd once written in anger, but now understood as release. "I don't forgive what you did. I forgive what it made me become stronger. You taught me what love isn't, so I could learn what it truly is. Home isn't where people live, it's where peace stays." The words no longer burned, they glowed. I folded the letter back, carefully tied it with ribbon, and placed it inside a small wooden box marked "Then." I didn't need to send it. She'd never need to read it. Forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. The next morning, I visited the new community center, the heart of Margaret's Haven. The air buzzed with energy. Women filled the bright open space, some meeting with lawyers, others laughing over coffee in the corner. There were children playing near the bookshelf, and volunteers hanging up artwork from the last self-recovery workshop. I walked through the rooms, slowly smiling at the small details. The letters pinned to the wall, the scent of freshly baked bread from the kitchen, the sound of laughter where once there had been silence. One of the volunteers, a young woman named Leah, caught up to me. "We just got a new grant," she said breathlessly. "It'll cover another year of rent and expand the legal aid team." "That's incredible," I said, genuinely moved. Leah hesitated before asking, "Do you ever miss them?" "Your family," I thought about it. "Some days, yes," I said honestly, "but I don't miss who I had to be around them." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and went back to work. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I stood in the empty hallway, looking at the rows of photographs, faces of women who'd rebuilt their lives. Each picture was proof that the past could be rewritten. I whispered, "We're not here to erase the past. We're here to prove it doesn't own us." As the sun began to set, I walked down to the beach. The sky was a blaze of pink and gold, the kind of color that makes you believe the world still has softness in it. I slipped off my shoes and stepped into the cold surf. The waves lapped around my ankles, washing away my footprints as soon as I made them. I let out a deep breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I used to think revenge was power," I said quietly, "but real power is walking away with your peace intact." The sea answered in its own language, one I'd finally learned to understand. I stayed until the last light faded from the sky, then turned back toward my home. The porch light was glowing softly, the windows warm. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the stars flicker over the ocean. For once, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call or apologize or fix what was broken. It was already fixed, not by them, but by me. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Hi," a nervous voice said. "My name's Dana. I got your number from Margaret's Haven. I just wanted to say, your story gave me courage. I'm testifying against my husband next week. I was terrified, but hearing what you did, it made me believe I can do it too." Tears stung my eyes. "You can," I said softly. "You already have. You made the choice to stand up. The rest is just walking forward." She let out a shaky laugh. "Thank you, Emily. Really." When the call ended, I sat in the stillness, letting her words sink in. Maybe this was the real ending, not the trials, not the forgiveness, but the ripple of courage that traveled from one woman to another. I looked out at the horizon, the moon rising over the water. I once believed revenge was the end of the story. But forgiveness is what lets the story keep going. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, know this: you're not alone. You can lose everything and still find yourself again. Family isn't made by blood. It's made by truth, by love, by choice. They said I ruined the family, but what I really ruined were the lies they called love. And that's not ruin. That's rebirth. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, tell me below, what was the moment you finally said enough? And if this story touched, you share it. Somewhere out there, another woman is still trying to find her peace. Because the truth doesn't destroy families, lies do. In the end, I didn't find home in the place I lost everything. I found it in myself, and that's where it will stay.